1999 was a crazy year, in gaming, wrestling, and in the world. In gaming, we saw some incredible games being released, from Donkey Kong 64 to Final Fantasy VII, Mario Party to Resident Evil 3, Shenmue, Silent Hill and the first Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, and Super Smash Bros. All made their debut on consoles around the world. On top of the ongoing releases on Game Boy, Nintendo 64 and PlayStation, 1999 also saw the release of the Dreamcast, which would go on to sell just over 9 million units. In the next few years we would see 2 WWF titles, 2 ECW titles and 5 Japanese wrestling games make their debut on the Dreamcast. In the professional wrestling world, starting in January, well, we really don't have to wait long to get into the biggest thing that happened this year. Maybe the biggest thing that ever happened during the Monday Night War itself. Whilst WWF Raw was pre-taped at the time, announcer Tony Schiavone announced in a sarcastic tone that Mankind would be winning the WWF title that night on Raw. Something that, as a WWF fan, would be a total shock to the system, and would actually come out of absolutely nowhere at the time. Mankind wasn't even booked for the world title shot till halfway through the first hour of Raw, meaning that people flicking back and forth from channel to channel now had a reason to just stay put on Raw, either to find out for sure if Mick Foley was winning the title, or to see if WCW was actually lying about the title change. Over 300,000 viewers immediately switched channels after WCW had delivered the spoiler. As it would turn out, the WCW was in fact not lying, and Foley went on to win the title that night, whilst WCW would bait and switch a Goldberg-Kevin Nash title match, then even worse, would deliver a 20-second Nash vs Hogan match, their most notorious of all time, the finger poke of doom. And just like that, the undefeated streak of WCW's television ratings were defeated, and WCW went out not with a boom, but with a whiff. One of the most legendary backfires in pro wrestling history, that rare situation where you get spoiled, but the spoiler sounds so awesome that you're interested anyway. So now let's move on to the wrestling titles of 1999, and to start, unfortunately in chronological order, we must start with the WCW NWO-Thunder. WCW NWO-Thunder is almost identical to the Nitro game that came previously, just with a gigantic roster. Like, this roster is legit insane. It's too big. Why is it so big? This game plays like the last game, but there's something off about it. Sure, everyone had the exact same moveset last time around, but this just feels weird. I can't seem to hit a single move, and they added the lockup function which doesn't really seem to do anything. I'm kind of lost playing this, I'm not gonna lie. This game feels lazier than before. Once you win the world title, a video plays that seems to be the same for everybody that wins this game type. And I guess that makes sense, as having a different video package for all 80 of the people that are in this game would have just been crazy. Crazy like having playable cows and aliens? Well, yes, exactly that crazy, but just not as fun. The interference button, which was actually present in the last game, makes winning matches way too easy. Just get out of the ring, lure your opponent, hit the button, get back in the ring, and win. It's as easy as that. Hey, if this game doesn't want me to put effort into it, I won't. It's simple as that. This title included full-screen wrestler entrances with theme music, commentary from Tony Schiavone and Mike Tenay, full wrestler battle royal matches, steel cages, weapons, signature moves, taunts, and finishes, as well as 128 playable characters, including fictional ones. Oh, and by the full-screen entrances, I mean that they showed wrestlers walking out of the ring from actual wrestling shows. Nothing animated here. Better than nothing? Perhaps. This game, as most of these titles around the time, were based around the divide between the NWO and WCW, including the Wolfpack, NWO Black and White, and the WCW. Thunder also included the return of the incredible rants before you pick your characters. This time around, I'd say there's a few worth checking out. At least this time around, the rants seem to make actual sense. The wrestlers want you to choose them, instead of skipping over them or facing them like before, with some objections, like Scott Hall.
You selected Scott Hall? Big trouble for you. I'm gonna rough you up, you little punk.
Nash doesn't want to be chosen.
Hey! What's wrong with you? I heard Nash! Nash said don't pick me! Fine! Because I can smash Nash! Pick Hogan? Put him to sleep 3 times! Pick me! You know why? Because everybody's gotta pay the price.
Piper even acknowledges that Nash doesn't want to be chosen. Jericho's theme in this game is overdubbed, and that makes me really sad. If you're going to steal someone's song for TV, why not just put it in the game as well? That being said, they included Raven and DDP's Nirvana rip-off themes, and Saturn's You've Got Another Thing Coming style theme. It's just bizarre. All I want to do is listen to Mammoth, just once.
しました。まさに魂の一撃。
For the 1,000. WWF Attitude was released by Acclaim Entertainment on July 31st for the PlayStation and Nintendo 64. The game was developed by Sculptured Software, the guys behind WWF In Your House from 1996, Warzone from 1998, Royal Rumble from 1993, and even Super WrestleMania from 1992. It would also be the 14th straight wrestling game produced by Acclaim, and would be the last official title made for the WWF. In addition, the game's original release date was meant to be March 1999, before getting delayed into June, and then again until its ultimate release at the end of July. Its first planned release date was the time on WWF television when Dr. Death Steve Williams was getting a mid-card push, where he was managed by a heel Jim Ross. The official strategy guide makes note of this, and it's important as most people don't really even understand why Dr. Death is present in this game at all. A slightly enhanced port of the game was later released for the Dreamcast, as well as a handheld version for the Game Boy Color. And although we'll talk in more details about the differences between console variations, I have to say straight away that the N64 version does not have different costumes that can be chosen. Something that honestly is very disappointing. Limiting the replayability of every single character in the game by making them always have their bland default outfit is 100% a sin. Especially when over on the PlayStation each wrestler has 4 attires in total that can be selected immediately after the game has started. It's kinda crazy to think about, especially when the other costumes are present in the game and you happen to choose a character 4 times over. Guess it's down to the limitations of the console and the cartridge-based gaming system in place, but I really don't get it.
My silent rage!
Even the Dreamcast version does not have access to alternative costumes when choosing your selected wrestler.
The Diggity Dizzog is in the house!
This game, of course, is a sequel to WWF Warzone and the last WWF game to be published by Acclaim. The WWF would go on to sign a deal with THQ later in 1999, ending a 10-year relationship that began with WWF WrestleMania. Were people excited for a new wrestling title after Warzone? Hard to say. After delivering a game like Warzone, it's probably pretty easy to make something that improves upon what we saw previously, and comparing to the Warzone footage that's seen on screen, it's very easy to see how far they have actually come in this regard. Presentation wise, this title looks leagues better. Even by just looking over the older footage of mine, you can see how far things have come. The graphics here are about what you expect. Textures resembling photos of the wrestlers stretched over a model composed of 20 polygons, having 2 polys for the left and right side of the faces. The skins themselves don't look too great, but the blood is especially bad looking. It genuinely does look like somebody just went into paint and added some red marks to the texture itself. Of course, the Dreamcast does seem to have the best looking blood, but not by much. The crowd in the PlayStation and N64 versions are bland 2D images, limited to around 3 frames of animation and are just kinda blurry. The Dreamcast version though, this one went straight for the Daytona USA school of crowd, and they are all animated too much. It's hilarious to look at. Some hold an Austin 316 sign and others just bounce in their seat. I guess the thing to do here would be to get them more involved whilst hitting big moves and getting the crowd on your side. Would have them more animated, just like in WWF Warzone. But outside of the 3 frames that we tend to get on the 2 base consoles discussed here, there probably isn't much more that could have been done. Although it's probably obvious when watching the footage back, I didn't really realise till after the fact how good the Dreamcast version actually looks. I was leaning towards the PlayStation and N64 just for the gameplay side of things, but graphically, the Dreamcast version does look great compared to the other two, even if this was just a below HD image stretched to fit. The game seems to have only 3 arenas, though this isn't actually the case. It's only because the rest of the arenas are locked behind the custom arena selection when choosing before the start of a match. When hitting the custom button, you can put together the worst looking WrestleMania arena of all time. Completely lackluster, just replacing the Heat logos with the WrestleMania ones. Or if you fancy wrestling in Kane's fancy pink lighting, you can choose that right from one of the options here too, having one of the worst last man standing matches ever seen between Jeff Jarrett and Kane, bathed in a beautiful Barbie pink glow. When it comes to gameplay alone, most characters feel almost identical to play, due to having so many identical moves throughout the entire roster. It is interesting when you get mismatched against different opponents. Take a match between Sable and Shamrock for example. It definitely feels different to take control as Shamrock, as most of his moves end up with you hitting either suplexes, submissions or throws, as well as some kicks for good measure. It's definitely enough to keep it fresh. Blood, as I mentioned previously, makes its debut in this title, after not appearing as an option in Warzone, and it really does just look like someone took a Sharpie and put it on the opponent in random spots. It really is strange to see the back of Billy Gunn's hair start to bleed, while The Rock suddenly have blood appear on his chest or arms. Weirder than that was the time that I won a fatal 4-way by drawing with Billy Gunn when The Rock was counted out. This came after I pinned Road Dogg and eliminated him, so figure that one out. It's time to talk about the roster selection found in WWF Attitude. You have the obvious guys returning from Warzone, that being Steve Austin, Triple H, The Rock, Taker, Kane, Mankind, Ken Shamrock, Owen, The Headbangers, Goldust, Farouk, and both Cactus and Dude Love, though this time they are locked away as different costumes for Mankind, so only take up one slot. It's a missed opportunity honestly, as when playing as Dude Love or Cactus, you are essentially just Mankind but with a different skin on top. No new lines of dialogue or moves, so having Cactus Jack use the Mandible Claw is just a weird one. There are 42 wrestlers in Attitude compared to the 18 wrestlers of the base roster of Warzone. The new guys are highlighted by newcomers like Al Snow with Head, an actual floating head who you can wrestle as, mid-carders like the Grandmaster Sexay, Taka Michinoku, Gangrel and Val Venus. There's a random selection of guys such as Dr. Death, Jeff Jarrett, Jerry Lawler, Jacqueline, Sable, Droz of all people, Paul Bearer and Mark Mero, as well as others who just overall round out the roster quite well, like the entire faction of DX, X-Pac, Road Dogg, Billy Gunn, the Heartbreak Kid Shawn Michaels and Chyna. The entire ministry is also relatively present, with the APA, Edge and Christian. The Nation are here too, with D'Lo Brown, Godfather, Mark Henry and their former leader The Rock. And on top of all of that, we have the last video game inclusion of Owen Hart, somebody who this title was dedicated to, with his in-game reaction and appearance being that of a babyface who is cheered whenever he makes his way to the ring, a very sweet token by Acclaim. His death delayed the PlayStation and Nintendo 64 versions from its initial release of June 1999, likely to remove his blue blazer alternative costume as seen in early screenshots from an April 1999 prototype version of the game. The dedication to Owen was removed from the Dreamcast version due to the wrongful death lawsuit being filed against the WWF by the Hart family. Owens is still, however, a playable character in this version. Let's also take a quick look at the pay-per-view mode, where you can make your own pay-per-view, essentially creating your own ring and match card on the spot, then playing through the entire thing in a row, seeing if you enjoy it or not, I guess. There's not much to it really. It is possible to have a King of the Ring match in every single match though, which is weird. I guess you could do 8-man tournaments in a row. What's actually very cool about pay-per-view mode is how you can set a match limit to super low, making each wrestler basically start the match knowing it's a squash. Kane beating Steve Blackman in 25 seconds, Big Boss Man beating Edge in 35. It's a great little feature that just adds a little realism to a match, especially if you just book something to fill the spot on the card. I can only imagine how cool it would have been in 1999 to kill some time, throwing together your favourite pay-per-view card and seeing how it would play out gameplay wise. Obviously it wouldn't be super like the real thing with no run-ins or championship titles on the line, but I feel for a younger player this would be a really cool thing to do. On top of that, the idea of putting together a dream card to compare with your friends could also be something that people would be into. I can just imagine having friends come over and sleep over and say, hey, my favourite match on so-and-so's card was this, and then putting together a whole new pay-per-view with a whole new bunch of lights and stuff and just coming up and seeing what you have. What's especially weird about this pay-per-view that I made is that because of the blue ropes and the white lighting, it just kind of reminds me of Impact, so it's really strange to look at. Before we move on properly from the roster, I want to talk about the alternative costumes again, because there are some excellent ones here on show. A great example is Goldust, who has 4 different variations of his standard 1998 design, including a flashback 97 style Goldust from his debut with Marlena. Mankind, as noted, has Cactus, Dude Love as alts, as well as his referee attire from Mania 15. Road Dogg has some sweet looking hardcore style attires from around that time period as well, whereas somebody like Jacqueline has a crazy looking attire, which is just a straight bikini. Kane, of course, has his 1-sleeve and 2-sleeve, black reverse colored 2-sleeves and 1-sleeve variants. Taker's default look in this title is his ministry gear, but as an alt is his slightly older look from 1998, as well as his super older look from his debut style gear complete with big fluffy purple and grey gloves. The Rock has his iconic Royal Rumble 99 gear, as well as a few variations on his classic logo. Jeff Jarrett has 4 quite unique looking gears, including a super flashback attire from his 98 SummerSlam appearance. Owen Hart has 4 iconic gears from his post-Brett run, whereas a guy like Bradshaw has his Blackjack style look, and Farouk has his Nation of Domination look. Again, it's absolutely bizarre that you can't choose any of these attires on the Dreamcast version. What sense does that make? The Dreamcast version is meant to be the definitive version of this game, and it's just not. Better graphics, better audience animations and textures, better soundtrack, but still lacking compared to the PlayStation version.
The ministry will soon reign.
Let's move on to taking a look at the different match types found in WWF Attitude. There's a bunch of match types on offer here, although there is a few that are just kind of pointless. Lumberjack seems like one of those. 2 wrestlers stand around at ringside and that's it, that's the match. I guess if there was an easy way to throw your opponent to the ground outside, this match would make more sense. There's gauntlet matches, tag gauntlets, Survivor Series matches, the Royal Rumble, Battle Royale, War, which is essentially a 4-way elimination match, a stable match, as well as the standard triple threat and triangle matchups. There's a hardcore match option, cage match, last man standing, tough man match, which can only be used in handicap matches, whatever that means, and falls count anywhere. There's modifiers like Iron Man, I Quit, Finisher, 2 out of 3 falls and First Blood that can be added to any of the other match types. From looking at the main menu, there is also a King of the Ring option, so let's take a quick look. It's a fairly simple game type mode, pairing up 8 superstars against one another, with the option to skip each of the CPU's matches or watching them play out. And that's about it. I had a quick run through a Triple H, and as easy as it was, in the last match of the night, The Undertaker just completely squashed me, hit me with a chokeslam and pinned me straight up. So...
Triple H is in trouble.
Are you ready?
Hardcore matches in this title are still very similar to the ones found in Warzone, and was something I tend not to choose, mainly due to the fact that it turned off the entrances. The weapons found here though are a pretty decent selection. From Austin and McMahon's bedpan to a briefcase and a TV, though my favourite weapon of all is the microphone. This weapon is absolutely hilarious. It's just funny every single time a wrestler uses it. It lets out an incredibly loud amount of feedback throughout the arena, and it never fails to crack me up. It's just so funny. It's weird to see that these few weapons are the standard as opposed to chairs, tables and other more normal selection of weapons that were found more so around this time period. Though chairs can be found outside the ring. Other weapons featured include a handheld camera, trash can and Al Snow's head. time to talk about Career Mode, which makes its return in this game, and although this version is genuinely an interesting creation and would make a return in the following two acclaimed titles as well, it does leave a few things to be desired. You're tasked with picking a single wrestler or a tag team with your friend, and then making your way through the ranks of each of the available singles titles. You have around 15 opponents, not including special matches or challenge matches, where you're essentially tasked with building your star up from jobber, wrestling weekly on Heat and house shows to Raw, and eventually earning yourself a WWF European Championship match. Of course, occasionally there's thrown in matches like lumberjack matches, triangle finisher matches and matches like that, but nothing really shows out after a sea of match after match. There is no storyline here at all, which honestly is very disappointing. I guess I wasn't expecting cutscenes, but the least that could have been offered was anything, and this is not that. This is nothing. Before each match you get a look at a calendar, with all types of matches on the list: Heat, house shows and Shotgun on Saturday night. After eventually making your way through past the Grandmaster Sexays, Dr. Deaths, Val Venuses, Edge and Christians, you eventually get to wrestle guys who you haven't even unlocked yet, like Kurgan, which is at least something interesting. As noted, I do think there is something to this kind of mode. It's essentially the universe mode of today, just instead of having the normal shows like Raw and SmackDown, you bounce from house show to house show, hoping to get your hands on a European title shot. I don't think there are many other games that offer this kind of an interesting idea, but maybe I'm wrong, but I honestly do believe there is something to this. Playing wrestling games is it's a form of wish fulfillment. By playing Attitude, you get to enjoy the monotony and boring nature of going from town to town wrestling in front of nobody for literally no goal. This could be something if the WWE leaned into it a little bit more, but there isn't anything that really got this close to having something as interesting and engaging as this kind of career mode. And speaking of career mode, this game really loves to throw complete and total nonsensical matches at you. And I'd be doing fine, win after win, moving up the ranks, then suddenly I'm in a battle royale or a 2-on-1 handicap match. Just completely unfair. So let's fast forward. I get to the top of the European Championship title mode, and during a grudge match with D'Lo Brown, Jerry Lawler ran in. Immediately after dispatching them both, I was tasked with a triangle grudge match against both of them. Guess I'm not the champion yet after all. After around 6 minutes, I managed to hit both of them for rock bottom to hopefully put the European Championship around the People Champion's waist for the first time. Or so I thought. Then came another 4 matches with Lawler, Kurgan and D'Lo, but with random stipulations. Suddenly it was the end of the month and I was facing Lawler for the European title at the King of the Ring. I hit all my favourites, the Samoan Drop, Float Around DDT, Spinebuster, took him to Suplex City before scoring the rock bomb and winning the championship. It's worth noting that losing at a pay-per-view would knock you back 3 points in the rankings, a huge loss if you happen to experience it. It turns out I unlocked a new cheat and was given a big congratulations as I was the new European champion.
It's time once again for everybody to come aboard the train!
Up next was 5 belt defences, I guess, before we move on to the next title, the Intercontinental Championship. Honestly, the entire point of career mode would be to fight for a title, being able to see somebody actually hold the title at the end of it, and that just isn't something that's possible here, which is definitely a shame. We saw how cool it was to have our wrestlers of choice hold a title in the previous WCW title developed by Aki, so it really is a shame that the excellent WWF titles aren't seen on the shoulder of wrestlers who win them in this title. Career mode is also where most of the unlocking comes from, with the European title for example unlocking the trainer as an active wrestler, and new creation options and squeaky mode. Squeaky mode made the theme music and in-ring introductions sound super squeaky. It's pretty funny. Even the audience is squeaky as well as the announcers. Even the main menu is squeaky.
I'm gonna take it out on your hide! Someone should start digging your grave.
Other unlocks range from Big Head mode, Beat mode, a mode which bleeps all of the swearing in the game, as well as having other random unlocks take place during pay-per-view matches. King of the Ring, for example, would have you unlock Kurgan and Taka. Wrestling in the Rumble would grant you Lawler and Paul Bearer. SummerSlam gives up Sergeant Slaughter and Shawn Michaels. The motion capture in WWF Attitude is nothing particularly special. The gameplay is pretty much a mirror of WWF Warzone with a ton of blocky movements that are on par with most fighting games of this era. Although they were not featured in this video game, Matt and Jeff Hardy provided all of the motion capture behind the scenes that are seen in this title, just like in Warzone. Let's talk about entrances. Now, it should probably go without saying that for the time, these were incredibly neat and kind of revolutionary in a way. The wrestler walks down to the ring, they sometimes pose, and they have their actual theme music. The lights flash for them, they have their entrance pyro. It's definitely a step up from Warzone. It's a shame that somebody like The Rock doesn't have much more of an entrance. Instead of walking to the ring, not posing, just kind of standing awkwardly. There's guys like Christian who would walk out to the ring with the music and lights synchronized, whereas his partner Edge walks in through the crowd, which does look excellent. He even lets out a scream whilst in the ring. There are guys like Taker and Kane who have some of the best entrances, which should really go without saying. They're pretty timeless, though the Dreamcast in this case kind of ruins the entrances entirely by having the transparent fire look kind of green sometimes. This could of course be an emulation issue, but nonetheless it isn't present on the PlayStation or N64 versions of this title, so I blame the Dreamcast. When comparing each of the entrances on each of the consoles, the PlayStation, well, it's tough to say if it really wins this one. It's very close between the PlayStation and the Dreamcast. The arena goes completely dark and the shadows and the light mixing together look absolutely surreal and realistic at the same time. It does look really good. Taker's entrance with the moody blue light and Kane's entrance with the sweet red flame mixed with his alternative attires is very cool. The trade-off though, and this probably goes without saying, is the damn loading screens, which are completely absent in both the Dreamcast and N64 versions. Well, they're absent if you're playing a one-on-one match. Loading into the match straight after loading into the entrances is quite a sin, especially on the PlayStation. There are guys like Stone Cold Steve Austin when making their entrances actually hit all four corners and wobble when make their way from one side to the other, and look absolutely ridiculous when doing so. It's also worth noting that each of the three arena types have a different style of entrance. The pay-per-view ramp is completely flat, whereas the Raw arena has stairs leading down to the ring, which honestly is very cool. It's awesome how they programmed each wrestler to walk down the stairs, something I didn't even think about. On top of that, Austin has his glass shattering entrance and Gangrel has his sweet rise from the floor entrance, but only in the Raw arena. Triple H, Road Dogg, Billy Gunn and The Godfather all have their own voiced entrances, where they either magically have a microphone if they're appearing in the ring, or actually make their way out whilst holding one. Another excellent little detail.
It's me, it's that D-O-double-G.
Even weirder is when Vaughan does his vocal entrance without any kind of microphone at all.
Hello, ladies.
And now let's talk about the post entrance and what comes next. Well, it's time for the smack talking to begin, and honestly it is very impressive how many lines each wrestler actually recorded for this game.
You can't kill my buzz.
You will kneel down before the Lord of Darkness.
It's a huge amount of commitment that is missing even from today's titles.
Step on up to bat, cause I'm supplying the wood.
Call me a maniac.
The fact that Austin has over a minute of different lines is just insane. What's even more insane is that almost everybody else on the roster has about the same amount.
I'm gonna beat your ass, and that's the damnedest bottom line I ever bottom line.
Of course, somebody like Sable only has a few lines. Time is money after all. But somebody like Farouk will rant about how your soul now belongs to The Undertaker for minutes on end.
Oh, you just sit back and watch out for the sky high or the lowdown, brother.
Again, much like we heard with Warzone, it's definitely a off its time feature. We saw this in the WCW titles from around this time, so it's not an overly original idea, though the WCW stars cutting a single promo doesn't compare to the excellent content that's on offer here.
Now you'll feel the power of the world's strongest man. You just didn't listen, did ya?
China, for example, who was relatively not known for her speaking parts around this time for some reason, has all anti-DX quotes, as this game came out straight after WrestleMania, where she joined the corporation, which is a very weird dedication to the bit.
I am by far the strongest woman alive.
Let's talk about controls. Now, for whatever reason, the Dreamcast and the N64 controls are very similar and essentially work the same through emulation, though the PlayStation has always been much more dependent on the front buttons instead of the triggers. Of course, the PlayStation controller, although originally lacked analog sticks, did always have R bumper and R triggers, though named R2 and L2. When it comes to these titles, I feel, honestly, I really enjoy the Aki-inspired control system. It's so based. It's great. Using the bumpers of the controller for Apple and attacks makes perfect sense. Of course, a title like Attitude complicates things slightly by throwing in the kick button, which is assigned to triangle or the Y button on the controller, making my fingers have to leave my beloved triggers and bumpers. They're cold without the sweet embrace of the bumpers. Oh, so cold. To heat things up, Attitude brings back the beloved up, down, left to right fatality style move system that was debuted in Warzone. This time around, a super kick is as easy as left right square from Shawn Michaels, making this move totally unfair. Super easy to spam that one. Kane's tombstone is up, up, down, which of course, like before, is similar to Taker's up, down, up circle, which is actually the same as Austin's Stone Cold Stunner. I much prefer the way that Warzone had both tombstones and opposite inputs. Now, a move like the Godfather's Pimp Drop is a sweet left, right, down punch, whereas a Shamrock ankle lock requires a left, down, right kick. Speaking of finishes, it's still hard to see when and where one is actually the most effective. On the Dreamcast, I hit Droz with 3 almost straight Fame asses before getting the pinfall, with him jumping straight back up and no-selling the first 2 that I scored on him. In other matches, a single finisher is more than enough to put the opponent away, though I do think this ties into the time limit on a match being made shorter, therefore making moves more effective and brutal, leading to quicker matches. Although there is something to be said about the unseen momentum style gameplay that is present underneath the surface, during any match it's important to try to use a variety of moves to get the crowd cheering for you. When they begin cheering, you can inflict double damage to your opponents, and you automatically kick out of pinfalls and submissions when you are low on health. So if you're about to lose a match with low health, it's important to get the crowd cheering. When the crowd is cheering, your name will start blinking rapidly. I kinda wish more attention was given to this, or if it was explained at all instead of just assuming we'd figure this out, but there it is. There's a new box next to the wrestler's name, known as a tie-up meter. The more blue the box, the better chance you have of winning a tie-up game with an opponent, though I always found that just spamming buttons quicker than my opponent tended to have me coming out on top and just ended the tie-up prematurely, which probably wasn't the way this game was designed to be played. The power bar also makes its return from Warzone. Blue stun meter from Warzone is now completely gone, which is odd. I didn't even notice that. The heads-up display is definitely easier to understand this time around due to its simplicity. The move complexity score also makes a return, where if you attempt to hit a stronger move on your opponent without a full lockup bar and they go for a weaker move, the weaker move will tend to normally win. It's definitely an upgrade from Warzone. Once you finish a match, there is always stats on display. It's new but completely useless. I skipped over this 100% of the time. Is there anything else worth discussing about Attitude, or have I said enough? For my time playing Attitude, I enjoyed it. It's easy to pick up and master, using kicks and punches before you start looking into what each wrestler's moves are and learning the combinations. You can kind of feel yourself start to grow as you play more and more and start to learn the way that a character is controlled. It's a shame that there is no major swing of momentum during a match, with major reversals playing next to no part in this title. Sure, you can reverse a suplex or no-sell or finish a move when the crowd is behind you, but apart from those two things, there isn't really a strategy that you can put to work. Running at an opponent, knocking them down time and time again, it just isn't a rewarding experience. It's a cheap way to beat someone. There's no incentive to explore the outside of the ring either. You can get beat real quick outside with no way back in. So it's also a negative to slip outside the ring. In an Aki title or any other wrestling title than this one, running to the outside provides a moment of clarity and gives you the chance to let your opponent cool down a little. In some titles, the opponent will give chase, which also happens in Attitude, but it's really just a pointless thing. I understand that every standard wrestling game now needs decent intros and the ability to go outside of the ring, but with no way to really launch attacks through the ropes in a highly successful manner, it does seem rather pointless overall. That's not to say that over-the-top rope moves aren't in this title, as they are, but I for one have never found a useful one. Battle Royales and Royal Rumbles are fun for a little while, but after about 5 opponents, the novelty runs out very quickly. The ability to suplex people over the top rope is great, and sometimes I truly miss this in the current day and age, but again it runs out of steam. Hardcore matches are dull and uninteresting. Your opponent stands up, you knock them down, you pick up another weapon and repeat. There is no thought to it, no strategy, and is just a gimmick. Cage matches are awful. You must damage each opponent till their health is red, then leave. That's it. No ring ropes, again, for whatever reason, just boring and uninteresting. As I spoke about in passing, the controls are incredibly archaic, even for a title released in 1999. The analog sticks had been around for a couple of years and are a must in sports games. Imagine if they were included even slightly. Each console this game was ported to, not including the Game Boy Color, had an analog stick that could have been used, and that's not even mentioning the completely missing vibration function in this title. Maybe going forward there could have been a different way to present moves to you, or a way that standard wrestling moves could have been implemented. I don't remember ever actually being forced to use the lockup feature, though hitting B or O in every wrestling game after WCW vs. the World essentially used the lockup feature extensively. The lockup in most wrestling games served as a gateway to a whole new selection of moves to choose from, and this honestly felt completely absent from Attitude. All of the huge moves that you need to pull out came from just standing in front of your opponent without engaging with them first. Is this without doubt a negative? Well, not entirely. Although different states of wrestlers standing in the ring in front of you could very easily serve as a simple way to activate the next set of wrestling moves. Some moves could be executed easily, keeping them rather simple, whereas locking up would unlock another 4 moves that could be used next. Upon picking up a dazed opponent from the floor, this could unlock another set of moves that could be used exclusively in that scenario. Now I know at this point I'm probably just describing every wrestling game that came out after this one, but if you think about applying that to WWF Attitude or Warzone even for a second, you can only imagine how much better this would have made the gameplay. Another note that is worth mentioning is how crisp and clear the songs are for each wrestler, apart from on the N64, but even that version is trying. Now, to correct something that I said earlier, changing the option from everybody to teen basically unlocks the wrestler's original unedited theme songs, which is something crazy I didn't even notice until after the fact. Oh, and I also want to touch on the Create Wrestler mode, as it makes a return. I didn't mess around with it very much this time around, but I did when the title was new. I actually have a memory buried deep within my brain from 1999, where myself and my sister actually put together a wrestler at a party when I guess we were bored. I can't really explain it. I do have to say that in closing, the commentary did get a chuckle out of me, and it definitely deserves a mention before we close this chapter. I did love the way that Shane would interact with Jerry Lawler, referring to him as Kingfish, like it's his crazy uncle or something. It was cute, and it wasn't something that Shane had to go out of his way to do. If you think about the commentary teams at the time, I believe Shane had some kind of experience on working on Heat and other B shows, as well as some random guest commentary spots here and there, but by 1999, especially by WrestleMania, he was already the European champion. Even crazier than that is that every line that features gender has an equivalent for the other gender, for a game that has 3 female wrestlers. What sense does that make? Just insane. And it was a nice thing for Shane to do, stepping in for JR whilst he dealt with a health issue he was facing at the time. WWF Attitude is fine. It's honestly not the worst wrestling game ever made. In fact, it wasn't even the worst wrestling game that came out in 1999, but it sure as hell wasn't the best. To wrap up my thoughts on WWF Attitude, I do want to say that I did enjoy my time playing this game. There is something very nostalgic about it, and the visuals and the audio and everything and the roster combined really does create a space in time, so to speak, that does resonate with me personally. I love the Attitude Era, and WWF Attitude, I suppose gameplay wise, I can see why people dislike it. I suppose presentation wise, I can see why people dislike it, but in terms of a title that was made in 1998 and released in the year after that, I do think it's a pretty good product, and it does sum up the era pretty well. I mean, what other game can you play as Taka Michinoku and Kurgan? Unfortunately, that game does not exist. So Attitude is, it's definitely a good example of Russo era writing WWF.
Good evening, wrestling fans. Welcome to tonight's worldwide television presentation of Monday Nitro. It is scheduled for one fall. There will be no time limit.
I'm the greatest.
Introducing first, he is a member of professional wrestling's elite, Ernest the Cat Miller.
When this guy comes down to the ring, you can be sure of one thing, that he's going to cause some serious damage.
The fans look to me like they're in a surly mood.
WCW Mayhem, released by Electronic Arts, developed by Kodiak Interactive, was released for the PlayStation, Game Boy Color and Nintendo 64 on August 31st, 1999. Look, it was 1999. EA was a respected brand, though instead of creating this title in-house, they had Kodiak Interactive, a game company who was known for an RTS title, and only an RTS title, and basically just chose them to develop it. Although this seems like a strange decision, it's a story that actually will repeat itself, as the WWF does the same thing later on with the Raw series, and that company no longer exists. So yeah, it's their first WCW title, but not to worry, this is WCW in 1999. The Finger Poke of Doom was 7 months ago. Nobody even remembers that, so please, don't look at the constantly declining ratings. Don't listen to Eric Bischoff when he says on TV he'll be fixing things. They also had a Game Boy version created for this title, who again had never made a wrestling game previously, instead working on a 007 title beforehand. That company no longer exists. Now, after launching WCW Mayhem for the first time, we're greeted with the weirdest intro to any wrestling game at the time. We essentially see Goldberg being formed by scientists in a lab before his eventual escape into the scene, ready to concuss Bret Hart and cost him $3 million Saudi dollars. The title screen presents the obvious selection: Quick Start, a way to jump immediately into a match with a random wrestler. Main Event, our way to choose our own match type ourselves. Quest for the Best, the career mode present in this title, the goal of beating each contender before having a title match for the title itself against a reigning champion. The pay-per-view password screen, which we'll touch on in a second. Create a wrestler, and the global options screen, used for turning up and down music and commentary. Jumping into the main event scene, we see that there is in fact 12 different pay-per-view arenas present in this title, something I applaud greatly. I was getting seriously sick of making my own arena by picking random parts and putting them together in the acclaimed titles. Even WrestleMania doesn't have 12 arenas to choose from. Hell, even SmackDown doesn't have 12 arenas to choose from. On top of the 12 arenas listed, there's also 12 back rooms that can be visited by throwing an opponent backstage or just running and heading there yourself. Upon doing so, the camera switches to a CCTV style look, which is actually, it's kind of awesome. This game stole WWF SmackDown's whole backstage gimmick a year before WWF SmackDown even did it themselves. There's single matches, tag team matches, four-ways, battle royals, triangle matches, and handicap matches. There's Raven's Rules, Falls Count Anywhere, weapon matches, and that's about it. No table matches, ladders, cage matches, infernos, caskets, etc, etc. There's also easy, medium, hard difficulty selection on the screen before every match, so you can make your selection of how annoying you want the AI to be. Now, before we get into this title proper, I want to touch very quickly on the pay-per-view password selection that is present on the main menu. Honestly, an idea that is just brilliant in my mind. During pay-per-views, or even on Nitro, WCW would release a password to unlock matches for you to play on that night. For example, a password reading a bunch of random letters would unlock that night's matches, like Jericho vs. Juvie for the Cruiserweight title, Raven vs. Goldberg for the US title, Booker vs. Psychosis for the TV title, and Savage vs. Hogan for the World title, a card straight out of a WCW Nitro show that would be airing at the time. Now, there were hundreds of these passwords available. These also were used to unlock certain arenas, and other totally wacky cheats. Honestly though, the way that the WCW roster changed so rapidly and randomly, it would be hard to keep this up for long, as guys like Sid Vicious would come into the company and quickly get a big push, so most of the passwords would be missing multiple matches. This lasted 3 months after the game's release and was given out on the Nitro before the pay-per-view itself, which honestly, yeah, I really like this idea. It's truly creative. This cheat would also unlock some cool things though, like Rey Mysterio in his masked look.
He's got to be like the tubby uncle you have at Thanksgiving over to your house, mooching food. He's got to let it all hang out after dinner. If he does that, he's sure to put him away.
The roster, like most WWE games, is split into multiple parts, with the WCW, NWO Hollywood, Wolfpack, Four Horsemen, Cruiserweight and Hardcore divisions all being separated. Although they get really cheeky with it, because guys like Sonny Uno appear under the Hardcore section, which is just, yeah, I guess they had nowhere else to put them. There is 17 hidden wrestlers, with nearly all of them being unlocked for beating Quest for the Best on a certain difficulty and on a certain weight type. The only one that doesn't unlock is Chris Jericho, who you need to actually unlock by fighting in each of the backstage areas. Honestly, I am very impressed with the roster in this title. There's a bunch of super important guys to the company at the time, with your obvious Goldberg, DDP, Sting, Hogan, Hall, Nash and Bobby Blaze, with also total and complete surprises like Chris Jericho, who was just super gone from the company by August, signing his WWF contract on June 30th. There's a playable Eric Bischoff, Mean Gene Okerlund, Jimmy Hart, and just a bunch of other people that, yeah, just weird inclusions. There's Sergeant Buddy Lee Parker, the entire Ravens flock, the awesome Norman Smiley, Doug Dillinger, La Parker. There are notable guys here like Kaz Hayashi, Canyon, Ernest the Cat Miller, Eddie Guerrero, Bobby Blaze, Bobby Duncombe, and even Bobby and the Pussy. Bam Bam Bigelow makes his WCW title debut after his tenure in ECW coming to an end. There is a genuinely great amount of guys available here to be selected. On top of that, the models themselves really do look great. I love the look of these. Although they don't emote in any way outside of random grunts in the ring and taunts, these are better texturally. These are better models than what we had in WWF Attitude, although that title did have its own gritty style to each person as opposed to the cleaner look of each wrestler here. That being said, the animations absolutely let these titles down. There isn't a frame in this game that isn't spent looking at a character standing with this stupid meerkat style look on their face. It's how they walk, how they grapple, and how they stand idly on the character selection screen. It's absolutely ridiculous that they looked at this and decided it was totally okay for every character to look like this. It's hilarious. Now, according to Wikipedia, hidden within the game's audio files are commentary lines for over a dozen other personalities, as the known names included Tony Schiavone, Rick Rude, Paul Orndorff, Mike Enos and Ted DiBiase. This strongly implies that they were going to be included in the game at one stage, which is just insane. This game has enough guys in it, truly.
Self-high-five.
The entrances in this title range from bland to uninteresting. A wrestler walks out, they might taunt or pose, then they move on to the ring. In the N64 version, their theme songs are absolutely abysmal and almost non-existent, though in the PlayStation version they are obviously much better because of the disc. The main thing that really holds these entrances together is the use of the commentary to accentuate each wrestler as they make their way out onto the ramp.
Now approaching the ring,
judging from that response, I'd say this crowd is not behind this guy at all.
introducing first, a true ambassador for the WCW Tag Team Legend, the often imitated but never duplicated Bobby Eaton.
Well, Brain, what do you have to say about him?
This guy stinks. He's got no charisma, no ability, he's ugly, and he lets his mommy dress him in the dark.
Stop it, please!
Obviously, they have their general name and stats announced, as well as a little something about their background by the announcer himself. But the little notes added by the commentators are just excellent.
Hey, Brain, heard anything about this guy?
This guy's got an awful lot of skills, but he still has a few flaws. That's what makes him bold.
I don't even know why I asked you, Brain.
From Bobby the Brain insulting the wrestlers making their way to the ring, or them just being talked up in general by the announcers themselves. It's worth mentioning here as well that the wrestler's exit from a match is also completely a non-factor. It's on the same level as Warzone and Attitude, which is a shame. They honestly couldn't even climb a turnbuckle and pose. Hell, sometimes they just left the ring entirely, though that seems to be more of a glitch. Most guys who also have very distinct entrances in real life just don't in this title. Where's the Parker's chair? You know what I didn't notice until after the fact? These entrances are almost identical to WWF Warzone, with the terrible pyro and everything. They stand on the stage and taunt. Still though, I do prefer what we got here when compared to later titles like WWF SmackDown later on down the line.
Breaker!
It's the original KID. Started in
You have no idea how much that hurt.
did it! He's won the match!
As noted, the commentary in WCW Mayhem is excellent. Perhaps some of the best I've ever heard up to this point. There's nothing close to this level, except for maybe Attitude and Warzone, but in comparison between those three titles, I do think the fresh nature of Schiavone and Bobby Heenan's quips and overall reactions to moves does add a whole other level to the matches that we're witnessing.
That one had to hurt the mouth of the South.
I don't even think he knows where he is right now.
Though there's a complete absence of music in said matches, the incredibly loud crowd is mixed well with the voiceover from the guys that we assume are at ringside.
There he goes, working the crowd again.
You know, anytime you want to start fighting, guys, be nice. You can't win by posing.
Bobby jokes Schiavone does his best to call the moves themselves and makes audible reactions to big hits and jumps on the top rope. Having Bobby quip that we have no idea how much that hurts really does add to a move. Whereas Schiavone excellently calls out certain move names, even in comparison forward in time a couple more years, the commentary found in this title is miles better than just Bringett's awful commentary that was on offer in that title. If you happen to use a move over and over again, something that's easily done as there's no move list in the goddamn options, really WCW again with this?
That looked like it really hurt. Hope he's got good insurance.
Whereas the music in the menus themselves is just random theme songs, Nitro's theme and all sorts of other little songs to just fill out the void, which is rather unexceptional. Raven has his sweet theme, Jericho uses something completely generic instead of his Pearl Jam ripoff, and DDP has his great Nirvana style track, and the WCW have theirs as well, but everyone else just completely fails to have anything memorable. The Mexican Cruiserweights have their LWO theme, even though the LWO disbanded, and guys like Conan and Ray also use something rather generic. Oh, and before I forget, the N64 version of this title doesn't have Bobby Heenan at all. Like, not even a tiny bit. It's literally just Schiavone commenting to himself, speaking to his made-up friend Bobby, who doesn't have a microphone or exists, because it's just Schiavone on his own. Weird.
Some guys think the key to victory is nailing the guy in the corner.
He was really working him in the corner.
When you really want to put a beating to a guy, there's no better place than the old corner.
Now making his way to the ring, he is the WCW World Television Title Champion, representing the NWO Wolfpack, Disco Inferno.
He looks living. You know, he looks like I do when I see Orton leaving my house at 3 in the morning.
There seems to be a lot of energy in the crowd tonight. Goes back to the same move.
What's up with this one-trick pony? Can't he do anything else?
Now he must be quite confident if he's taught him this much.
Ladies and gentlemen, your winner, Diamond Dallas Page.
Your winner tonight, Diamond Dallas Page.
This match went back and forth so many times, Tony. But in the end, he showed me and everyone who came to win.
This has been another edition of WCW Mayhem. Thanks again. Lion Tamer!
You have no idea how much that hurts.
He did it! He's won the match!
The gameplay consists of you essentially spamming buttons, as there is a ton of them to press in this one. Though no move list is present, there is a button for grappling. Once a grapple has been initiated, it's possible to activate one of 9 different grapple moves, one for each of the X, O and triangle variants. Sorry, is it circle? Some people might be funny about me saying O instead of circle. The square button is reserved especially for your finishing move, which is odd because guys with submission finishers can just spam said moves whenever they want at any point in the match, meaning I probably have half an hour of footage of me downing an opponent then spamming the walls of Jericho, Lion Tamer style, all over and over again. The finishers themselves also aren't much to write home about. Goldberg has his jackhammer.
That was incredible!
Raven has his DDT, and DDP has his Diamond Cutter. Once all of the wrestlers have made their entrance, thankfully the match just starts.
And with that bell, we're underway with this matchup.
Unlike in Attitude, where on the PlayStation 1 it decides to have a separate loading screen between entrances and the match proper. In a triple threat triangle match, you tend to just be stuck hammering and punching each other till somebody gets locked into an animation you can't actually break. This could be said for the game itself just in general, but spamming punches and kicks before you start to weaken them enough to actually try some grappling. There's also some top rope moves, though it would appear every member of the roster uses the big splash and the double axe handle. Though sometimes a knee drop can be seen from time to time. Talking of gameplay, this is honestly the first game I've ever played that allowed you to simply leave a battle royale. Just step out of the ring, head to the back. It's as easy as ever.
Spectacular move!
He's able to cinch in this hold. All the ref will need to do is call for the bell.
It's over!
As noted, finishing moves are a simple press of square. You grapple, hit square, and DDT to your heart's content as soon as your finishing bar is full. There's also a bunch of really strange inputs here. Pressing up and triangle will have you do a special kick or punch, meaning that more often than not you'll be pressing up to move towards your opponent and start spamming jumping spin kicks or spinning back fists, leaving yourself completely open for attack. I just wanted to throw a kick, not whatever the hell this is. Truthfully, there is a system at play here. Using different moves will fill up your momentum meter and the crowd will cheer when you hit a different move. They'll become even more powerful. If they boo, that's because you're using the same move over and over. Of course, with a full momentum meter, that's where you'll score a finishing move. Its strength, though, is absolutely abysmal. It will take 3 to 4 diamond cutters straight to down Kurt Hennig, and around 4 to 5 even flow DDTs from Raven to down somebody else. I did find this title incredibly easy to pick up and play on the PlayStation, though I had no idea what to expect. I first tried the old tested up, down, square to see if that was how to do a move, but nope, yeah, I totally went for the about to be tried and tested grapple up move system that would be SmackDown's bread and butter for years to come in the near future.
Almost had him!
The hit detection is absolutely abysmal and just doesn't work at all in multi-man matches. You will literally spend your time hitting 3 straight punches before the 4th one may suddenly hit. Wrestlers can become stunned after receiving a large blow. Once you pick them up, will just stand kinda staggered, allowing you to grapple up without any resistance. There's corner moves, the ability to throw your opponent over the top rope, which looks great, a really smooth animation to that one, as well as the ability to hit opponents with several different weapons in the hardcore and weapon matches that are available.
There's some serious damage. He's got the Singapore cane. What a brutal assault!
Medium and easy difficulty, selectable from the main menu, are just way too easy. It's all kind of weird. Hard mode though, that's where this game kind of steps up a little bit, begins to start countering moves often and actually beginning to fight back. Upon sliding outside of the ring, there is always 2 chairs just hanging out. Unfortunately, there's little flash to these. A shot to the ribs and a shot to the back, and that's about it for the chair usage, which is a shame. I wasn't expecting more, but yeah, there's no DQ in this one. As a way to try and get as many bodies on screen at once, I used the Battle Royale match type to take a look at a character's model in-game. This led to some incredible match results, mainly having the wrestlers throw each other over the top rope in quick fashion whilst I either watched or left on my own accord. But sometimes the wrestlers would both go after the same person and leave at the same time, meaning that there was sometimes actually no winner on a couple of occasions. Just excellent. I love little things like this.
He did it! He's won the match!
Ladies and gentlemen, your winner, Raven.
Total domination. Now those are the only words I can use to describe this match. Thanks for playing WCW Mayhem.
The quest for the best is essentially career mode that we've seen in previous WCW and other such wrestling titles. It consists of a one-on-one match with several different opponents, one after another, with each win taking you closer to your goal of becoming the new TV champion. I for one did not foresee myself having to wrestle to gain the right to take on Glenn Gilberti. If I wanted to do that, I'd just tweet him.
I'm sorry folks, but this match is just awful.
Nonetheless, this mode is actually a very enjoyable one. On your first playthrough, whether you choose a cruiserweight or not depends on which star you unlock, with guys like Lashley, Ric Flair, Scott Hall and Wolfpack Sting all being unlockable. Surely it's worth your time. Can you imagine a wrestling game having Ric Flair locked behind a story mode? Just bizarre. He's a marquee name, damn it. Here's something hilarious. I put in a cheat that changed certain characters to a developer and his children, so by the time I got to Stevie Ray in the career mode, my match was actually against a small child, which is totally in league of what Jericho would do in that situation.
Lion Tamer! There it is! It's all over! It's all over!
The winner and new TV champion, Chris the Lionheart Jericho.
He is now faced with the challenge of trying to win
the first time in one of these reviews, I actually need to genuinely shout out the arena selection in WCW Mayhem. It's truly a sight to behold. Not only is there 13 backstage areas, but on top of that, there are 12 pay-per-view arenas and several other TV shows available to do battle in. Though with that all being said, the arenas are completely random in look and style. Not literally, but they just don't resemble their respective pay-per-view shows at all. Perhaps they were given names and a sort of idea for what the show would be, then they've just come up with something. There's the bathroom where Vince Russo came up with his ideas for WWE television in 2000, the boiler room where David Flair learnt to wrestle in the dark. Wait, where is David Flair in this title? I want my money back! There's the day office where Bischoff played president, the daytime parking lot where the white Hummer would run over somebody. Or maybe it didn't, brother! The first aid room where Sid's leg was reattached.
These men have not only left the ring, but they've taken this metal to the backstage hallway!
As well as a nighttime variant of the parking lot. Insert joke here. Why do I know about all these backstage arenas? Well, for some reason you have to fight in each location during the story mode in order to unlock Chris Jericho. I know I touched on that earlier, but I just want to drive home that I actually had to do that. Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of danger trying moves like that, but if you can do it, you can win a lot of matches.
Connects off the rope!
Well, like they say, what goes up must come down. This time he just came down on top of him.
General reviews for WCW Mayhem were fairly mixed across the board, scoring around the 65 to 75% mark by most reviewers, though IGN gave the N64 version an 8.5 out of 10, which by today's standards means it's better than most of the good Pokemon games.
Well, it looks like these two remembered. They have a wrestling match to attend.
According to Wikipedia, a sequel to WCW Mayhem was planned to be released on PlayStation 2 in 2001 and was meant to be developed by Aki Corporation, the developers who we of course know and love. It would appear that the follow-up to this title, Backstage Assault, actually scared WCW into making a good decision by returning to the Aki Corp. But it's too little too late. Never mind. Overall, I did really think the graphics were impressive, despite the terrible crowd around ringside. I mean, they were good, just not built right. The scanning of these wrestlers was done quite well. Flair looks good, sometimes, but other guys like Scott Steiner, and sometimes even Jericho, just look awful. WCW tried something different with these character selection, and having the characters stand on the screen whilst you're selecting them. This works absolutely great on the N64 and the no loading, but doesn't translate well over to the PS1 version. The game performed well enough, the moves flowed despite feeling clunky, so I really enjoyed the animations themselves, though coming from the Aki titles, it would appear that WCW wouldn't know what success was, even if it bit them in the behind. Their unwillingness to wanting to share a developer with their competitor was short-sighted, and led to the WWF having their games created by the Aki Corporation moving forward, which would bring us to our next title. I didn't know that WCW Mayhem existed until I was looking at the timeline of wrestling games and what came after Attitude. I honestly thought that WrestleMania was like the main game that was going to be taking up the rest of my time in this video, and then stumbling upon WCW Mayhem and then realizing, oh, I need to play this now, I need to actually put this in the video and give it some proper time. And I mean, I did want to kind of skim over it and make the video a bit shorter, but then when I got into it, it was like, okay, EA actually had some kind of idea with this game. They actually had an idea of what a wrestling game should be. The 12 arenas, I mean, there's 15 arenas in that game to choose from, including the free TV arenas. That's super impressive. That's incredible. That really isn't featured in any other wrestling game for quite a while. I mean, it's not present in SmackDown, it's not present in No Mercy. That's a really great number. Even if you don't think the arenas themselves are very impressive visually, just having the option I think is very cool. The create a pay-per-view or create a password, whatever that feature was called, super impressive, super interesting. You know, why doesn't something like that exist now? I think as a child growing up, if a WWF title said, hey, if you want to play tonight's card, here's the code, I think I 100% would have done something where I'd be watching Raw and then I'd get the password and I'd go and I'd play the matches myself. I would have loved that growing up. That would have been incredible. It's such a cool feature that WCW fucking invented and used. Even if it was used sparingly or used for a short amount of time, that's an incredible feature. Really interesting. Yeah, I like it a lot. I do also really want to say that the commentary in WCW Mayhem is so vast and so seriously impressive, like genuinely impressive. I think that WCW Mayhem going forward from this point in time in 1999 is like the benchmark for like good commentary in video games, wrestling video games anyway. Like Attitude's commentary is passable, Warzone's commentary, you know, not good at all. WCW Mayhem's commentary is excellent. It is really good. About WCW Mayhem's commentary and announcers, and then go and play SmackDown, which is a title that is remembered incredibly fondly. People still consider like SmackDown and SmackDown 2 to be some of the best wrestling games of all time. Here are two games that don't have commentary, don't have full motion entrances like WCW Mayhem does at all in any way. They don't have ring announcers at all in any way. It's incredible. I mean, like I said, I don't want to repeat myself too much, but commentary in WWF Just Bring It is absolutely abysmal compared to what we hear in WCW Mayhem. And to remind you, this is a PlayStation 1 game. How incredible is that this random EA produced WCW title has the best commentary that we hear for a while. Better than the first two WWF SmackDown games, better than Just Bring It, better than Shut Your Mouth that doesn't have commentary. Probably better than Here Comes the Pain. Here Comes the Pain I think has a very small amount of commentary. You know, it's not until 2004 with SmackDown vs. Raw that we actually get some like decent enough commentary for a WWF game, and here WCW are in 1999 giving us a presentation like this. I think it's worth mentioning. It's worth kind of gushing over. I think it's, yeah, for a title that took me by surprise, I do think it's badass, man. I really, yeah, WCW Mayhem, yeah, the commentary alone blew me away. And even though it was so simple, it was still so funny. And compared to the nothing that came afterwards, for a very long time now, I'm going to be covering the next few games and there's going to be barely any commentary. WCW Mayhem to me is number one on commentary. And arena selection, I guess. And backstage arenas. Even though they're square boxes with nothing that you can actually really touch in there apart from weapons on the ground. That's one thing that kind of lets it down. There you have it. Those are my thoughts on WCW Mayhem.
Released on October 1999, WWF WrestleMania 2000 was created by the Aki Corporation exclusively for the Nintendo 64. WrestleMania 2000 was the first WWF game released by THQ. The wrestling company ended its long relationship with Acclaim Entertainment after witnessing the video game success of its competitor, the WCW, which is a crazy thing to write. It implies that the WWF didn't see how Attitude played and looked. They really didn't need to see the success of other wrestling games to see how poor their current titles were doing. Now when taking a look at this game, it's really clear to see where this title originated. The previously released NWO WCW series and the Aki engine makes an incredible comeback. But what's new? What's been added and tweaked from the previous version of this title? Well, to name a few things, we have the cage match, triple threat matches, and the ability to have first blood matches. Some surprisingly missing things in the previous title's release. We have the beloved pay-per-view and King of the Ring modes, a must-have for any wrestling game from around this time, previously being seen in Attitude, released a few months earlier. We have the Creative Belt making its debut, although it's incredibly slimline and basic, and this may have actually been a first in any mainline professional wrestling series. The entrances also become a bit of a focus. They've improved and grander compared to Revenge. This title also had Titantrons and much better music, as Revenge used MIDI style files instead of actual music files. It was down to the limitations of the N64 cartridge system, but nonetheless. There's new walking animations, double team moves were added entirely, and obviously there's whole new moves, animations, taunts, and even the ability to hang an opponent in the Tree of Woe in the corner. Though that being said, they removed the quick match feature that was present in Revenge. They added the season mode, which was a huge change as well. No longer having a singular belt story being followed throughout, it instead allowed you to play more freeform and go up and down said rankings, winning each title you desire, a feature that was immediately cut from No Mercy that followed, though it is present in the first SmackDown game. They also removed the strike combo system, and for whatever reason in the UK and US versions, there isn't actually the blood I just mentioned. There's still the satisfying sound and the person will fall to the ground grasping at their head, but there is no actual blood there, unless you play the Japanese version. How strange. The year is 1999, and some would argue that WWF have some of the best talents in existence. So let's start there and talk about the roster that is present in this one. WrestleMania has 59 wrestlers to choose from, an incredible number, up from the 42 listed previously in WWF's last affair, Attitude, including the classics like Rock, Taker, Austin, Kane, Triple H and Chaz. There's new people making their WWF debuts, like The Giant, I mean The Big Show, Chris Jericho, Hardcore Holly, Briscoe and Patterson, Deborah and the Hardy Boys, who are finally making their debut despite motion capturing multiple games for the WWF by this point. There's also the ones you'd expect, like DX out in full force, the McMahons as playable characters, yes, all three of them, the Blue Meanie, Test, Viscera, Scott Taylor and even a Crash Test dummy. There's Cactus Jack, who's unlocked after defeating the WWF Hardcore Champion, Dude Love, who's unlocked after capturing the King of the Ring crown, and the WWF title at SummerSlam. Jerry Lawler and Jim Ross, who are unlocked at WrestleMania. There's Paul Bearer, and also Stephanie McMahon, and she's unlocked by playing as her former fiance, Test. The intricate create a wrestler and edit modes give players the chance to design new characters with specific appearances and mannerisms, and editing existing styles to fit their own personal taste. It's even possible to make people like certain WCW stars in this mode due to their taunts being able to be chosen. The roster is also notable due to its inclusion of Droz, the Headbangers and Jeff Jarrett, the only time that these certain people were available in a WWF THQ title. So who's majorly missing? Well, this title released in October of 99, so let's say July-August is the cutoff point for this roster. Well, there's no Mark Mero for Nucky, Too Cold Scorpio, Steve Williams, Steven Regal, there's no Taka Michinoku, or Luna Vachon, or Sable, that's weird. There's no Road Warriors, no Gilbert, Bull Buchanan, and none of the Mean Street Posse. And no Sergeant Slaughter. How strange. Out of those I mentioned, Taka is included in WWF Attitude, along with Slaughter. The funny thing about the Mean Street Posse, they're even snubbed until the next calendar year entirely, missing out on WWF SmackDown's first release, and only making their debut in the follow-up, SmackDown 2. The biggest weakness, honestly, is the roster selection though. The big hitters are present, but having guys like Midian, Viscera, Albert and Sean Stasiak filling up roster slots is considerably less fun than playing like somebody like a Shawn Michaels. Though that should go without saying. Of course, this is a personal opinion. Maybe people will go wild for Meat versus The Godfather. There's a full and complete Create Wrestler mode this time around, meaning it's possible to bring to life several new stars, or just create the old ones. This is the kind of mode that people would use back in the day to create stars of TNA, Ring of Honor, and whoever else would come to mind due to how small these communities are, and the incredible large overlap between the indie wrestling fans and people who would spend time, like myself, emulating WWF games on a Nintendo 64. there's a decent amount of clothing options available, with people like the Road Warriors being actually fairly easy to recreate, though this title really excels when it comes to movesets. Previously in WWF Warzone, you could only give a wrestler a set moveset, but this time around it's completely possible to go into each wrestler's moveset entirely and change each move to your heart's content. The moves range from simple things like arm drags and body slams, all the way up to triple powerbombs and Death Valley drivers from the top rope. The main menu presents us with Exhibition, King of the Ring, Road to WrestleMania, Pay-Per-View, Royal Rumble and a few other customization options. Now behind the customization options, these include singles, tags, freeway matches and cage matches, and that's about it for match types. Now it is possible to play Last Man Standing, Fatal 4-Ways, First Bloods, Hardcore and Submission matches by changing the rules of a specific match to fit what match you actually wanted to play. Honestly, this menu is super bare bones. There is a rather wide opinion on this title that it's a beta test for No Mercy, which released the following year, and I really do have to agree with this analogy, especially when it comes to the match types. Though this title, WrestleMania, has the big show, so, you know, I guess you have to kind of choose what you really want to do. Create a pay-per-view mode makes a return in WrestleMania 2000, this time around actually having quite a bit of effort put into it. Upon choosing a name for your event and the matches, up to 15 are available per show, you have an excellent looking pyro display to welcome you to your show and have the matches play out in front of you, whether it be for the titles you created or not. Let's talk about the create a belt mode real quick. It's basically just you type in your own name for a belt and then you pick a pre-made title out of the 5 or 6 that are available. That's it, that's create a belt mode. The Road to WrestleMania mode puts you in the role of a wrestler making their way from rookie to working your way up the ladder, earning opportunities to gain various WWF titles, playing in tournaments and being challenged by various wrestlers. Unfortunately for me, the only way to win the Road to WrestleMania mode is to capture all 4 of the main singles titles before entering WrestleMania, where you are forced to defend all 4 belts on one show. Sounds rough if you ask me. Well, that's what I thought when I started writing this script. See, it turns out that if you lose every single match, then win the Rumble itself, that's pretty much the only way to actually get a good ending in WrestleMania 2000. And yes, this game has endings for some reason. If you happen to be undefeated headed into the endgame, winning every single match but losing the Rumble, you will still receive the "too bad, please try again" ending. This is laughable. Why can't I stay in the mid-card? Why can't I just beat up Blue Meanie on Heat for a year over the hardcore title? To quote the Eye of Evil over on the GameSpot forums, it may sound like I'm blowing it out of proportion, but this is just not right at all. Not only is Road to WrestleMania one of the most frustrating story modes in any wrestling game, your run will be worth jack if you don't win the Royal Rumble. If I was my core that got screwed out of the title despite his 100% win percentage, I think I'd be having a field day with the WWF management. Now see, there are feuds at different parts, where wrestlers would come out and call out your wrestler to the ring, leading to wrestlers interfering in your later on matches, but this season continues whether you win or lose, which is great and would be the backbone of a decent season mode, but unfortunately the ending of said mode is what really lets it down. Now, if you do end up winning the championship before you're supposed to at WrestleMania, Vince McMahon would appear and strip you of said title no matter what. Literally, the only way to a main event mania is to win the Royal Rumble and go after the title in the main event. You can lose every other match that's available on the card. Now, to begin with, we load up Road to WrestleMania mode, choose our selected character, and let's face it, it's going to be Jericho or the Big Show, and we get a look at our current champions before we start. By default, it's all Stone Cold Steve Austin, the Hardy Boys, Jeff Jarrett, Mideon and Al Snow as the current reigning champions. Well, the Hardys won the tag titles in real life on June 29th. Mideon was handed the European title on June 21st, so that tracks, with Jarrett winning the IC title and basically holding it throughout the year after Owen's passing. We can basically say that this title's champions from a couple of weeks around June, early July of 99, though this career, like most, begins immediately after WrestleMania, setting you on a path of 50 or so weeks of matches until the next one rolls around. It's probably actually more than that considering there's Raw and Sunday Night Heat shows, but yeah. For my first match I had a triple threat against Brian Christopher and Chaz, which went an astounding 13 minutes. To follow that up on the card that was presented, Matt and Jeff wrestled to an 11-minute countout. Meat and the Blue Meanie defeated Gangrel and Edge in a 38-minute match, again by a countout, before I decided to actually watch a title match between Viscera and Al Snow. To follow that up was a Jeff Jarrett Farouk 17-minute match, a 47-minute triple threat match where The Undertaker defeated Test and Kane, and a 53-minute tag team main event between Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, and Triple H with Mr. Ass. Just total lunacy. There's an excellent little animation that plays at the start of each show letting Pyro Lukes in the arena, really giving us a feel for what the show is that's about to start. I truly believe that in late 99 this absolutely would have been my jam and I would have been totally hooked on this, but it ain't 99 anymore, guys. Honestly, just knowing that I was about to spend around 2 hours constantly wrestling Chaz and Scott Taylor, Brian Christopher and others stupidly low on the card just doesn't really seem that appealing. Here we have the true meat and potatoes of any Aki title, the incredible Aki style gameplay that we've come to grow and love. I do find this title to be a bit bare bones compared to what we came previously, but if we compare it against WCW World Tour, say, that would probably be a better point of contention, seeing as that would be the first title in that series for WCW and this would be the first for the WWF. Honestly, if all things considered, it's just another Aki wrestling title. It doesn't truly innovate or add anything new to the gameplay besides the things I mentioned in the intro. Though there is the ability to do the Doomsday device, which is always a massive pop from me. The tag team moves are definitely cool and add a whole other dimension to the newly implemented triple threats and tag team matches. I do wish there was a little more fluidity in their execution. Going into a grapple and having your tag team partner or opponent to help out would have been excellent instead of just timing your grapple stick to coincide with somebody you'd like to score a move on. Not complaining, just would have been nice. They've changed the spirit meter to say Attitude, which fits nicely with the Attitude era timeline of the game. There's now full entrances for every single wrestler, with every person on the roster, apart from tag teams who share themes, having their own unique entrance music. Though due to the game being on cartridge, it obviously just loops and is of rather poor quality. There are wrestlers who make their entrances together, though they need to be paired together as a stable beforehand. I do also enjoy that wrestlers post for moves that are coming towards them. Sending an opponent off the ropes and then waiting in place to catch them as they come at you always looks really impressive to me, as it's something missing from every wrestling game outside of the Aki titles. Now, hardcore matches are pretty fun, as they always tend to be, with some giant-sized weapons up for grabs, and cage matches do give a different take on the concept that was completely fresh at the time, despite the cage being absolutely gigantic. I honestly thought I'd have more to say about WrestleMania, but it's greatly lacking for me as a long-time Aki player at this point. I spent around 5 hours with WCWNWO Revenge, around a couple hours with World Tour, and between those two titles and this one, well, maybe about 3 to 4 hours, but I really just don't need to play more than that to experience what this game has to truly offer. This game is actually something that I did end up playing for a short while in 2001. I went through this strange period of time where I started asking for a Nintendo 64 again and had grown totally bored of playing the SmackDown series, especially after a full year of grinding the season mode to unlock Michael Cole, and was actually given an N64 by my sister's now ex-boyfriend. I played this title on and off for around a month, just enjoying something different before actually being bought a PS2 for Christmas that year and being, well, happy at the time with Just Bring It. But yeah, it's enough for me to say that I have played this one before, and I've played No Mercy a couple times at friends' houses too, but otherwise I was a PlayStation kid who just longed for a new experience. With all that being said, WrestleMania 2000 is a good game if viewed through the eyes of 1999 style nostalgic goggles. I can guarantee it would last longer than WCWNWO Revenge, though that's definitely a better title out of the two due to its more in-depth roster and super fun, unrepetitive career mode that's on offer. WCWNWO Revenge may be superior to WCW vs NWO World Tour, but the former has plenty of novelties making it special. One example is the crazy roster, not just WCW guys like Flair and Regal who weren't in the sequel, but also the Japanese stars who don't even have their real names but are obviously thinly veiled representations of real people. WrestleMania 2000 is the forgotten child of the Aki titles. World Tour has the novelty of being the first truly great 3D wrestling title, and Revenge is the peak of WCW gaming, and No Mercy is the refinement of everything N64 games did at the time. Thus, WrestleMania 2000 feels like the "oh yeah, that one" of the series, A fine game, but just overshadowed by the titles around the time. And obviously the timing also does hurt it a bit. It's a fine representation of the Russo Attitude Era, but the major injection into the mid-card via Angle and the Radicals that occurred right after this has made the roster seem even worse. I do really think I'd enjoy playing it if I had this in 1999, grinding season mode for hours on end, deep into the night, and honestly, I think that's what this series is really about. I try my best not to compare titles to what comes after only before, though this time around WrestleMania is deeply buried in the shadow of its bigger brother looming on the horizon. WWF WrestleMania 2000, although I clearly don't have too much to say about it in this video, I do think that it's worth kind of checking out for its own personal timestamp, you know, in the same way that Attitude is, that it is a rather remarkable landmark when it comes to wrestling games. It is kind of the turning point in wrestling games. I'm holding it this close to my face, by the way, and my eyesight is so bad I can't see what's on the back of it. So, you know, this title's introduction of incredibly basic features like double team moves and stuff really does help the series going forward. And although Aki only really lived to serve us a few more wrestling titles themselves, you know, yeah, they set the framework that going forward really serves as a positive going forward for wrestling titles, you know. I think that without WrestleMania, you know, there is some ideas present in that title that are immediately left on the cutting room floor. WWF No Mercy, which we're going to cover in the next video, which obviously came out in 2000, does not have full motion entrances, much like WWF WrestleMania. So as weird as that is, just think about that. That was something that they deemed cuttable from the game, and I guess could be. The focus is on the gameplay, that's fine. That's an approach that, unfortunately, right now in the current day, AEW just launched a game a year ago, and that does not have much outside of the 5 seconds that a wrestler spends on the stage. You know, the focus is on the gameplay, and that's fine. That's enough, I suppose. That's what you're into. I don't have too much to say about WrestleMania. It's a good starting point for the WWF and Aki's connection, their partnership going forward. I think it's a good starting point for both companies. But coming off of WCW NWO Revenge, a little bit of a step down, you know, a little bit of a step down. NWO and WCW Revenge has a much more interesting career mode present in the title, even though it's a bit more standard. Obviously that game, WCW NWO Revenge, doesn't have a bad ending to it. You can actually just choose a championship belt, play through, win the title, and then you're kind of done with the mode and you come away feeling good about your experience. Whereas with WWF WrestleMania 2000, you could spend 6 hours playing through, you could win every single match but one and get the bad ending. That's kind of unacceptable in my eyes. I'm not a big fan of that. But there you have it. Those are my closing thoughts for this video. So next up is 2000, and as excited as I am to dive into it, there is going to be so much, and I have to kind of mentally prepare myself. But yeah, I really hope that you're looking forward to it. It's always interesting going into these videos and kind of having the mindset of like, man, I can't wait for this game to come up. Like, I know that No Mercy comes out in 2000, along with SmackDown and SmackDown 2, along with the ECW title, but it's the stuff in between those games that's going to be like, okay, I didn't know this existed, but let's play it. Let's play Backstage Assault. Okay, we're going to play it. I've got to play it. This video series says I have to play it, so I'm going to play it. And then just see what else kind of pops up. But yeah, thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope that you've enjoyed your time here in the arcade. Oh, and I'll see you back with part 4.